But we are going to be talking about how we can empower users to engage with digital currencies like never before. We're going to be joined on stage by Jide Fashola. He is a global infrastructure lead in the financial sector for the Cardano Foundation. So he'll be moderating what's set to be a fascinating conversation. So please do welcome Jide and his guests to the stage.
Hello everyone. How's it going? I'm so tired. How's everyone doing? I know my role is a little bit long. It's probably the longest role name you've ever heard, Global Financial Infrastructure Lead. So I've been in CF for 4 years, and I would like to introduce my fellow panelists. So Mira from Binance, Daniel from Mercado Bitcoin, and Edward from HTX Ventures. So we're here to discuss about the impact of cryptocurrencies and how they of exchanges and how they actually help with accessibility into the crypto space. So I would like to start with Mira and the team introducing themselves. Would you like to go first?
Sure. Mira Judge. I head up risk and compliance for Binance FZE, our regulated entity under VARA, and I also head up regulatory licensing and policy for Binance. I've been in the crypto space for about 3 years. It feels like 30. And previous to that, I was in traditional finance.
Great. First of all, thanks for having us, Judy. It's a real pleasure. Thank you and the Cardano Foundation. I'm Daniel, I'll shorten to Cunha. I'm the longest name, I think, in the whole of it. I run corporate development at Mercado Bitcoin. I've been in the company and in the space for just over 4 years now. Always wishing I got in a little earlier, but like Mira said, feels like a decade already. So very glad to be here and hope we'll have an interesting chat here today.
Yeah, hey guys, this is Edward from Huobi HTX. I think I joined the industry since 2018. And for Huobi, we're also one of the oldest crypto exchanges, centralized exchanges, since the industry started. I'm right now hitting all the business development, B2B business, and the asset class for the whole group. Venture is one of the team I'm managing. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much for introducing yourself. So I would just like to start with, what do you see as the most exciting trends and the most pressing challenges we have today in the crypto space, and how exchanges could help facilitate those challenges and those trends?
Who wants to start?
Who wants to go ahead?
Okay, I'll start. So Binance, as many know, is the world's largest crypto exchange. We have 20 regulatory licenses now. I think the biggest challenge for us is definitely harmonization of regulation. If you look at even the basic definition of a crypto asset, or a virtual asset, or a digital asset, there is not one definition. So one of the things that we're finding a little bit challenging is having that harmonization like you would potentially in TradFi. So we're very much advocates of utilizing, the same terms as FATF would, calling it a virtual asset, and having compound structures in place from a global perspective, where given the cross-border nature of transactions, it would be easy for clients, because it's a global business, to be able to operate in different jurisdictions. And so with that, what we try and do is work with regulators, with FIUs, particularly in countries where there isn't the frameworks in place, to teach them. That's as really being honest as possible, because we are the experts as the largest exchange, as are my colleagues here. So being able to provide them with the learnings that we have is something that we very much are advocates of doing. And that's one of my roles when it comes to regulatory licensing and policy.
Yeah, education is very important to adoption of crypto as a whole. And this problem with cross-border transactions and regulation is also something that needs to be really resolved because, for example, remittance to countries in Africa, it's a big problem today. You know, if I want to send money back home, I can't really do it right now because there are no apps to help me facilitate that, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'll pick up a little bit on where Amira was pointing. I think the key word that we've always worked towards, and we feel we're in quite a special moment right now, is convergence, right? Convergence between the broader financial system and blockchain as an infrastructure and all the financial and other types of applications running on those networks and infrastructure. So we've worked for many, many years, you know, towards shaping, framing, providing positive input into regulation, educating the users. It can be quite overwhelming for investors, consumers, participants in general, you know, to confront themselves with the complexities of crypto. I think bridging that user experience has been a very, very important part of what centralized exchanges in general do. And looking forward, I think one of the topics that we're very engaged in and very excited about is real-world asset tokenization. So we were very, let's say, early movers in that before there were the three letters there to actually define it. We've been doing this since 2019, mainly on financial instruments and private credit and a number of different types of structures within that general frame. And we feel that's another huge step towards proving the point and proving the case for convergence, for optimization, for democratization of access and real impact in the financial markets and capital markets in general.
Vincent, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think a lot of different angles. I think firstly, for centralized exchanges, our responsibility is to help all the platform users to find a good asset to invest and trade. Right? I think we have working for that for decades, for a couple of years, right? But the challenge thing is not. I mean, number one, it's not it's hard for centralized exchanges, especially like the leading exchanges, to pick up the right asset. Because it's a lot of, you know, it's a very complicated situation for the asset operation. Sometimes it's because of the technology, sometimes it's because of the people operation, sometimes it's because of the implementations. You will see, oh, maybe in last cycle, some asset, they perform very well, but in this cycle, you know, the price is going down, I think. And I think that's the struggling part for centralized exchange operator to handle the case. Even I think for Binance the same. I think in the past few quarters, I think all the leading exchanges trying to list the good tokens, but not every single token perform well. But and your users, their willing is the same. They trying to come to your platform to make money. So they want you to list the good token, the token price which can grow, you know, continuously grow, right? But to be frank, it will be tough. I think that's the first challenge. And if you zoom into this fact back into the deeper side, it will figure out that the main challenge right now is, I think in last cycle we have very established, very, you know, successful narrative and the implementation case, which is the DeFi, open financing. I think it worked very well. But in this cycle, our challenge, especially from venture perspective, from listing perspective, is not many real narrative in the user case being proven. We see a lot of different segmentations, GameFi, SocialFi, Deepin, BTCFi, you know, everything RWA, but not every single topics really proof. I think the most promising right now, I think probably payment. I think I just discussed with him. I think we just discussed. I think payment may be quite promising in the real implementation case. I think that's the challenge which we foresee right now. And another challenge is also quite obviously is I think for this cycle, not like last cycle. Last cycle, you get 10 times incremental user come into the industry, which you grow the user base from 50 million to maybe 30 million to around 300 million. But for this cycle, maybe 300 million to only 600 million, for example. You don't have such strong growth rate, but you still need to keep such big business size. So that's why for centralized exchanges, the user acquisition is also a big pressure right now. There's a lot of other challenge right now we see as well. Yeah.
Edward, I'll come back to you. But Daniel, what are your thoughts on security tokens?
Security.
Or securitization of real-world assets.
Yeah, so
because how do you think that would shape the landscape of the ecosystem, and how is that working right now in Latin America?
Yeah,
is there like a huge adoption and so on?
So I can speak to Brazil in more detail where we're based, and Brazil has been undergoing an interesting process where, while regulation is still evolving, there isn't a definitive framework. Authorities in general have always taken a very pro-innovation and particularly pro-blockchain stance, right? So we have today probably one of the most comprehensive and developed CBDC projects, which we're very closely involved with in Brazil, led by the central bank, and really with the view to provide a full public market infrastructure. And I think that really shapes the way we've been able to, in a sense, push the fold a little bit on what's on tokenizing securities, right? So there was nothing prohibitive, as long as we're walking as close as possible to the general principles of the existing regulation for securities and capital markets. But there was a lot of room for us to start small, run a lot of MVPs, discuss those unclear and gray zones very candidly with regulators, understand where we could step and where we could not, and really start doing, right? I think that's the important part of what we feel very lucky and excited about in Brazil. We've done everything from tokenizing public debt structure to private corporate debt, credit card receivables, energy contract receivables, and so on. So quite a broad range of asset classes. We've done over 300 issuances in the past 3 years. We've been growing volumes quite consistently over the period. And I think that shows openness, right? Now, what happens is, now that there's relevance, now that you have probably over 1.5 million clients exposed to tokenized assets. We don't want to fully call them securities yet, but and part of those tokens are clearly non-security tokens. But now that there's scale, the regulators are accelerating that discussion, right? But in a very constructive way. I think somebody was speaking a little bit earlier in one of the panels about you hope that it comes, right? Because you don't want to be dealing with all the uncertainty. When it comes, it will give you a bit of a butterfly in the stomach moment there, because it can always go in many different ways. But I have to say, looking abroad and hearing from colleagues in the industry in other countries, we've been very privileged to have a very pro-innovation, a very positive environment to develop. So we're firm believers. We're seeing in practice the optimization this provides, both on the origination side for debtors and for investors. The particular mission we've sort of embraced is providing cheaper capital and providing better access to capital to markets that have been underserved by banks and the traditional capital markets, and building the funding around providing yields and investment opportunities to retail that would generally be restricted to institutional investors or very high net worth individual in terms of structures and yields. And it's been a great ride so far, and it's still the beginning, I think, right?
Yeah.
So.
Mira, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's something that Binance is looking to shape the conversation in the future?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we find is we're very much proponents of a two-tier system. So when you're looking at emerging economies, so Africa, as you had mentioned, so we've recently had consultations that have been issued by the Kenyan Treasury, the Central Bank of Ghana, and even the Nigerian SEC.
Interesting.
Which is no longer a controversial topic, as our colleague Tigran's, the charges have been announced just now, where all charges have been dropped against him. So
happy days.
Happy day. It's a wonderful news. But we're very much advocates of utilizing the experience that we have and understanding, regulators like ESMA, being collaborative and transparent with what we have learned, where we may have made small mistakes and how we're adapting to them, and looking at emerging economies and saying, okay, getting all the way regulated right now and coming up with a huge regulatory framework might just be too much for you, right? If you're not moving from a financial services model and you don't have expertise on the ground, let's start small. Let's be like India. Let's have the PMLA FIU registration, which was our most recent license that we got. Start with that. Look at the risks that you're really concerned about, money laundering, terrorist financing, and have an FIU type framework. And then we will help you with our colleagues to consult on the different types of crypto models that you have. Because you say the word exchange, but actually there's more broker-dealers in this market than exchanges. From a liquidity perspective, a lot of regulators don't understand the difference between a central limit order book, a broker-dealing model, a principals model. That in itself is not built into every regulatory consultation. So when we go back to the likes of Ghana and Kenya, we explain those nuances to them. And once they have an overall picture, then they understand this is actually bigger than we thought it was. This is going to be a much larger investment. So they like that approach of focusing on money laundering, terrorist financing, and avoiding that. And then following consultations with other players in the market, let's upgrade that framework. And we've had a really fantastic example of that in the UAE right here with VARA, the Dubai Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority. So I actually was at a consultant before I joined Binance, and Binance was my first project given to me. And this was over 3 years ago. I had no idea who Binance was. Genuinely, I've come from TradFi. I know how an exchange works, a clearinghouse works. But they gave me this project and they said, there's this company that needs a regulatory license. It's called Binance. I was like, okay, fine, sounds cool. Never heard of them before. But you learn a lot. You learn really quickly on your feet. And then I came in-house. And the first thing they said was, there's a new regulator. They're coming to Dubai. They're not the DFSA. They're not the ADGM. They're going to be the guys here in the Emirate of Dubai. And we've worked so closely with them for the last 2.5 years. We were the first virtual asset service provider to get a compound full license. And one thing that they have is they focus just on virtual assets. That's their expertise. Most people won't know that you can get one license, which will allow you to have an exchange and a broker-dealer, and a custodian if you want, and futures, and options. No other regulator has done that. And that's a game changer, and that's why you're seeing such a huge influx of people into the region. People are scared of MiCA, right? Europe, it's a behemoth organization. Yeah. We already saw this with MiFID II. MiFID II had to be delayed because it was just too complex. And now people in Europe are freaking out. The deadline's coming up, 1st of January. People don't know what to do. Every country, every NCA is in different stages. So people are looking at us as the UAE, even as MENA, the GCC. They are forward-thinking. They want to allow for this business. They want to protect customers, but they want to do it in a way that there is limitation, protections, regulatory frameworks. And I think we're at such an advantage here, and it's being able to have that transparent conversation with the regulator. We as businesses are the experts, right? We can explain to them all the nuances of products. I mean, I've just learned a lot from you. But we can have that conversation, explain to them how our business works, and then they can come back to us and adapt their rules. And that's one thing that Vara did fantastically. They had 11 plenary sessions before they issued any of their rule books. They had a round table with 20 different VASPs, and they said, this is what we think. Will it work in practice? And actually, some of those rules would never have worked. But they listened to us, they took the feedback, they adapted their rules, and then they issued those rules afterwards. So it's definitely a two-way conversation. It's very exciting for people like me because you get an opportunity to influence in a positive way emerging economies, and you can see the adoption of crypto in the next 5 years, blockchain technology, it's here to stay.
Yeah, I must say you've done a good job of regulation in Binance Mirror. And Edward, what do you think about, because one of the problems we have in our ecosystem today is we have a lack of VCs, right? And
Lack of VC?
yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, what do you think our ecosystem projects can do to position themselves in the right way to attract more VCs into the Cardano ecosystem?
Oh, you mean the Cardano ecosystem?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I think from the, if you look at the whole industry, I think it's a lot of VCs. I think thousands of VCs. US, Europe, Asia, we see a lot of VCs. Pure Web3 venture arm, we see a lot of good names, and they allocate a lot of capitals. But I think they are more independent. Maybe they focus on some segmentation. They focus on, usually when you look at the VC, top VC in US, they will talk about, oh, we focus on infrastructure, we focus on DeFi. And right now, I think 50% of the Web3 fund, they also invest into AI or maybe AI, crypto combination projects. But if you wanted them to join a dedicated ecosystem, for example, for Cardano, I think we need a very clear vision and a very clear implementation scenario. Maybe not Cardano, maybe we took others as example, for example, Solana, right? I think for Solana, they promote maybe deeping, institution, payment, and a meme coin. But for meme coin, VC usually cannot join. But for deeping, for institution business, like payment or whatever, PayFi, I think these are the VC which they interested in, and they can, I think, number one, they can understand the business model. Number two, they can allocate the certain amount of the capital because that's their job, right? And number three, they can see the promising future. I think for Cardano, it's the same. We need a very clear vision and a very clear segmentation which we can tell to all the VCs that, okay, this is the future and it's quite promising, you should join us. I think that's one thing. Another thing is, I think for Cardano, I think you guys are very active on the market. I mean, becoming more and more active on the market, I think, in the past few years. But I think more communication with the VC partners also important, because sometimes I think Cardano has a very strong community. You have tons of fans, users globally. But to be frank, a lot of VCs, for their partners, if you ask them, what is Cardano and what's their focus, the latest plan, to be frank, they are not really clear. So I think that direct communication is very important, not only with the centralized exchanges. I think with the exchanges, you guys done a very good job. For VCs, I think still some, gap here, understanding gap here. If we can fill in that part, I think there'll be a lot of opportunities. Yeah.
Daniel, what do you think about that? Is this something Mercado Bitcoin is looking into on a
project, I think much smaller than both Binance and Huobi, but we also have our venture arm. I think the challenge, from a pure sort of investing perspective, I think we see two, right? One is fragmentation on the infrastructure side, right? It feels a little, for me, I'm an older hand. I remember the early days of the internet where you needed to talk about ATM protocols, IP protocols. When you moved to mobile, you had your TDMA networks that didn't talk to your CDMA networks. So I think we're still at a point where those connecting dots are shaping up, right? All the the bridges, the layer 2s, the layers 3s, but there's still a lot of complexity on that end. And from a pure investment and business perspective, the question always is, does that enable or hinder your business model and your scalability, right? And I think that connects to the second point, which is scalable use cases, right? I think today, most of the scalable use cases we see are all connected to finance, right? And they're still in the beginning or in their early days, right? So when we take, for instance, what we do in our RWA, technology was, to date, a small part of the challenge. The big challenge was getting investors on board, getting the structures in place, navigating the regulators. Now that we have some critical mass, technology will play a huge role in enabling smarter use cases, right? And I think there just aren't enough clear examples of scale, right, in terms of applications, services, et cetera. So I think this is natural in any super early industry, right? We're going to have a lot of misses in between of the success. The business cases are going to become more consistent. The infrastructure is going to become more seamless, right? I mean, we should, in a sense, forget about the infrastructure altogether and concentrate on applications. And, it was really a great experience to be here. I think Cardano, I've seen very few protocols focus, for instance, on the enterprise side to the level that you guys and the Cardano community has been focusing. That's a great example, right? I mean, from this environment, we'll probably see a lot of the early use cases that go beyond finance or that connect to finance, but are really solving other real-world cases, right?
Yeah. Enterprise solutions are the way forward to really increase adoption. I believe is sacrosanct.
No doubt.
To that. You mentioned fragmentation, Daniel. Mira, I would like to ask you a question. What are your thoughts on how we can connect the dots in, say, places like Africa in terms of fragmentation for international trade, cross-border settlements, and all of that? How is Binance looking at that and positioning themselves to be leaders on that forefront?
So again, it goes back to that collaborative nature at the end of the day. I think a lot of countries like Africa, it's a massive opportunity for not just Binance, for blockchain. The banking system we know is completely fragmented in Africa. Majority of people don't have access to banking channels. And that's why the blockchain in itself has been so phenomenal for those users. You can send money on your mobile phone. It's instantaneous. There's less risk there. There's not such a hassle. So it's being able to work with governments who I think, in all fairness, are probably a bit scared. They have a very traditional mindset. This is how finance should work. We don't really understand the blockchain. I mean, I'm here speaking to these experts, and I'm learning so much, and I've been in this role for a long time. But essentially, it's working with the governments, being collaborative, educating. You picked up on this before. Education is key here. That's the only way to get over the hurdle, get people to be a little bit less concerned about what does the blockchain do, what is crypto, how can it benefit the wider infrastructure, and look at all of the use cases that we definitely will see going forward. I mean, crypto, blockchain, it's here to stay. It's like the internet was maybe 10, 15 years ago. We all cannot function without internet on our phones, and for sure within 5 years' time, there will be no way that you cannot use the blockchain. It will be integrated within our supply chains, in finance, in healthcare. So it's kind of just, it's here to stay. Instead of running away from it and thinking of it as something scary,
we need to embrace it.
Embrace it, exactly.
Yeah. And Edward, what do you think about, Mira mentioned Africa, is HTX Ventures looking into venturing in Africa?
Number one, I totally agree with Mira. I think Africa market is definitely a very promising, very high-growing market. We definitely want to put an eye on that market, but to be frank, we have very limited resource. If I have more fund, I will 100% allocate into Africa market. But right now, for our group, I mean, we more focus on Asia market so far. But Binance, as the global leading exchange, I think they should, I mean, it's also their responsibility, and also they have enough resources to allocate. We're happy to see that they help the whole market grow and the industry grow.
No pressure, man.
None.
No pressure at all.
Yeah.
So actually, we're almost done. I would like to ask people in the audience if they want to ask any questions, or if they have any suggestions or any ideas, if they want to ask the panelists some questions. No? Anyone? Any questions? I see yellow card in the audience. Do you have any questions for our fellow panelists? No? Okay, awesome.
Maybe I can just expand a little bit on Mira's point. I think there's a great opportunity for emerging markets for two reasons, right? One, there's real problems to solve, right? A lot of problems to solve in many markets. Brazil, I think, is a little different in context to the rest of Latin America, but one very, very relevant use case and adoption driver has been the major problem of currency debasing in several countries, right? And that has, in effect, opened the opportunity for, when we look at Argentina, what people call exchanges, for us look a lot more like banks, right? It's banking, it's payments, it's getting your money in the beginning of the months, easily converting to hard currency, and creating the usability so that you can actually live that way, right? So, and it's much more developed in that sense in Argentina than in Brazil, because our currency at this point, gladly, is a lot more stable, right? So I think that sort of dynamics is a big driver. And second, it's the opportunity to leapfrog, right? The smarter central banks and authorities, I think, will take a view towards, rather than try to catch up, in my very lagging traditional frameworks and so on, how can we be forward thinking and use technology, use innovation to leapfrog some of these problems and create more easily a new architecture for our financial markets, financial services, capital markets, and so on, right? Because a lot of what we put in place, in Brazil, for instance, the big capital market infrastructure regulation was being developed in the 90s, right? It's a great framework. It did very well for us. We're a very, very sophisticated, I'd say, financial industry in Brazil altogether, but it's 35 years old, and moving from legacy to the future is always more challenging. Yeah. It's slower to move. We were talking about education. We obviously, one big part of that is towards regulators. Another that we did a lot in Brazil was towards the banks, right? Even as they were shutting our bank accounts and, shutting the bank accounts of founders, executives, and so on, we were doing conferences and seminars, et cetera, inside the banks so that we would provide more clarity on where this was all going, right? And I think the third aspect is we need to make less mistakes, right? As an industry, there's probably good reason that there were major concerns, major loopholes. There are a lot of bad use cases, bad actors. That's closing down. But it's, I think, all of our responsibility is really to embrace the fact that, the less we step on the legitimate concerns of governments and authorities, and, the easier the conversation is going to be on how we build this future that we're all so excited about.
Yeah, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. So I have one last question for the panel. What would be your bold prediction for the next 5 to 10 years within the crypto space? Who wants to start?
I'll maybe start with that. Our central bank governor, who's been a very key figure, I think, in pushing the theme, I think he's been hammering this sentence that in not too long, everything is going to be tokenized, right? And that's really the view we're taking, right? I mean, we need to abstract the financial layer, the application layer, and the infrastructure layer. From the infrastructure perspective, in finance at least, everything will be tokenized just because it's very clear that the technology makes a ton of sense, right? And we're scratching the surface still because, you know, the legacies are not integrated. We don't do full use of the technology we have, and we're still in the very early days of the technologies and applications. So it's going to be an exponential growth. The faster we can move regulators, financial institutions, the broader stakeholder system, the better. But everything will be tokenized. That's, I think, the big view we're taking here at Mercado.
Looking forward to it. What do you think, Edward?
I think few directions. Number one, I think the user size will definitely over 1 billion users. I think that's number one. Number two, I think the whole industry will become more mature, especially from the asset and project angle. All the project and project operator will move their mindset from just token-oriented to the business-oriented, or maybe the implementation-oriented. I think that's the second direction. Third one is, I think, industry focus will move also from infra to more consumer-level applications. And we can see a lot of new, big, successful consumer-level application generated in the next 5 years. Yeah, not only for financing. I think finance is good enough, or maybe almost good enough. Maybe other aspects like games, like socials, like deeping solutions, enterprise solutions.
That
we'll
sounds
see.
exciting.
Yes.
Exciting times ahead.
Yeah.
Amira, what do you think? Or
We're excited about probably the more mass adoption of DeFi for the traditional financial space. I think it will make things far more inclusive and transparent, and I think that's where what everybody wants to see and where the industry is moving. And again, it's blockchain and all the nuances attached to it are here to stay. So it's how to make our lives a lot more effective and efficient, and reduce a lot of the capital burdens and the slowness that we've seen within the TradFi space, especially through this adoption.
Awesome, awesome, sounds good. My prediction is that I believe in Africa, they're going to be using a lot of cryptocurrencies, especially stable coins, right,
yes,
to really move the market forward. Because today you have market women that sell tomatoes and sweets and stuff. They use stable coins right now to actually trade, which is great. So in the near future, I'm hoping that's how things would go. And even also the likes of using blockchain for voting, right? Because that's one problem we have today in the ecosystem. You have governments and presidents that are being put in office that weren't voted by the people, you know. So having that decentralization element in that would also be great. And also from a financial standpoint, as aforementioned. But it was a pleasure having a chat with all of you. Thank you very much to the audience for listening and being patient with us. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.